Big Cat, there's always something to discuss in the world of the NFL.
Well, there's always something to discuss in the world of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think is the appropriate way to say it, because they have single-handedly given us an entire offseason of storylines to keep us ready to go up until the Combine. They basically have been the stopgap between, Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, and now these James Harrison comments to help us get to the Combine and get to the draft and get to the 2019 NFL season.
And of all the former Steelers that would have become renegades in the media against the Steelers, James Harrison, I guess on one hand you would say he's the most likely. On the other hand, you'd say he's the least likely because he hated the media. He didn't want cameras around. He didn't want to interact. But also he seems like the kind of guy who would love to just turn everything upside down. And that's what he's at least trying to do. He has comments about the Steelers, and specifically he puts the blame on the head coach. The head guy has to be the one that takes charge. I believe it's fault on, even with my situation, it's fault on me, it's fault on Tomlin, it's fault on the team. It's got to this point because Tomlin has allowed a certain amount of things to go on, and rather players take advantage of that or step beyond that. It's got to a point where it's so far out that now he can't rein it back in, so to speak. And I hate to say this, but he's right, because everything about Antonio Brown, look, this guy came in as a sixth-round pick. This guy didn't come in as the 6th overall pick. He was allowed to morph into a diva. He was not a diva when he walked through the door. So somebody, ultimately Tomlin, allowed him to be late, allowed him to live off campus and not with his teammates when they were at training camp, allows him to breeze into the locker room when everybody else is in their uniform and he's just showing up and there's no consequence. He is smitten by what he can do on the field, so he's never stood up to him, and he's allowed it to be this way. And that mentality, I think, has created the situation that the Steelers now deal with, where there's different rules for different guys and the dysfunction has completely taken over.
The different rules for different guys. Also, if you read the Harrison, what he said, I think the important part was the Big Ben portion of his quotes. He said, for me, Ben being the unquestioned leader, I have no problem with that situation other than the fact that no one is beyond unquestioned. And how many times do we hear stories about Bill Belichick treating Tom Brady just like one of the other 52 guys? Reaming him out in tape, in film, reaming him out on the sideline, making sure that he is as focused and as ready as everyone else on the team. And the leadership does come from the top. It's usually the coach. It's usually the quarterback. And if the coach treats the quarterback differently, you will immediately get resentment from everyone else on the team, from guys who think they are just as skilled, from guys who are getting paid just as much, from guys who think they are just as important to the Steelers' success. And then that's where it all kind of falls apart. That's where the Antonio Brown thing, I'm not excusing Antonio Brown for kind of being all over the place the last year, but it makes sense when you can't have that quarterback-coach relationship that everyone can look to and say, okay, if the quarterback has a bad game, the coach is going to hold him accountable, not hold everyone else accountable and let him kind of slide. And I think you've seen it through tweets and statements from Antonio Brown that the Steelers treat Big Ben differently than everyone else, and that starts the resentment in that locker room and has a lot of guys saying, I want money and I want to be out of here.
Best example of the point you made when Chad Johnson was traded from Cincinnati to New England. This was after the lockout in 2011. So there was plenty of stuff had gone on from the Super Bowl, from the playoffs, until everybody gets together for the first time. No offseason program. They're all gathering. And Chad Johnson's in his first meeting with the Patriots. And the first thing Belichick does, he puts up film of the playoff loss to the Jets from the prior year and destroys Brady in front of everyone and scares the crap out of Chad Johnson in the process. That's what Belichick does. That's what you do. No one is above the team. And it's not just Tomlin as it relates to Roethlisberger, Big Cat. It was the GM earlier this week that had this long monologue about how Big Ben can do whatever he wants and they should listen to him and he can call me out if he wants to. And that tells me that the problem doesn't end with Tomlin. It goes higher than Tomlin. The GM, the owner, where are these folks in the organization that could say to Tomlin, we can't have this? Or that could say themselves, go into the locker room and say, hey, guys, this is the way it's going to be if Tomlin's not going to do it. So I think there are plenty of people who have blame for what's happened in Pittsburgh, and I think the fans are starting to slowly wake up to it, that something significant has to change at the top of the organization before the team is ever going to be as good as it can be.
So what is this going to look like for 2019? Because that's the interesting part. It feels like with these quotes, with Antonio Brown's imminent trade, with Big Ben getting a year older, doesn't it feel like this is almost, they're all kind of the walking dead when it comes to what the future of the Steelers look like? The future of the Steelers is not going to be Big Ben in 5 years. The future of the Steelers is probably not going to be Mike Tomlin in 2 years. So what does that look like? Do they, if they get back to the playoffs but fall short again, do they put it all back together and try to do it yet again in 2020? It's just a weird situation because it was kind of contaminated just to quarantined, to just Le'Veon Bell to start the season. Now it feels like it's spread everywhere. Now it feels like everyone's pointing fingers and everyone's kind of blaming everyone else. And it doesn't seem like a team that can put it back together and play football next year.
One thing I've learned living in and around Pittsburgh most of my life, when the bar is high for the Steelers, they find a way not to meet it. But when the bar is low, that's when all of a sudden they blow it out and they end up having a great season. So maybe this is good for the Steelers, that all of this stuff is dragging down the perception of what they're going to be, and maybe they find a way to rally around it. Maybe they fix it just for 1 year, and they end up being far better than we expect them to be, even without Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown. But you do feel like this is all coming to an end, that something big has to happen. And you mentioned that Mike Tomlin may not be there in 2 years. The one thing, and I've made this point before, as this dysfunction really began to unfold in the offseason, the Steelers seem to put too much of their identity in the fact that they've only had 3 coaches for 50 years. Like, that's this weird point of pride. Like, hey, we've only had 3 coaches for 50 years. Well, you know what? Maybe there's a point where your coach has to think, I can get fired. I think every football coach has to believe that there is a way that the facts will unfold that results in the ultimate accountability landing on me and me not having a job. And if that is taken off the table in Pittsburgh because they like being able to say we've only had 3 coaches in 50 years, then your coach is never going to feel that. Tom Coughlin's best 2 years with the Giants were 2 years he was on the hot seat. They won the Super Bowl both years. Sometimes it's good to be on the hot seat. And I think that until the organization is ready to hold coaches accountable and be ready to fire coaches, you're not going to get possibly the best performance, or you're going to allow this kind of malaise and this complacency that leads to dysfunction.
That's a great point because, a lot of organizations go too far where everyone is always, working for their job or fighting for their job, and then you get the infighting. But the Steelers are the other side of the, the pendulum swinging here, where Mike Tomlin, why would he change? What incentive does he have to change if he knows that he's going to have his job pretty much no matter what? And now I should also say that the Steelers still have an unbelievably talented roster, and at the end of the year last year, they were one of the hottest teams. I think they were one of those teams where everyone was looking at, if they can get away into the playoffs here, they're playing some good football. They went down to New Orleans. They were that Juju Smith-Schuster fumble away from possibly winning that game. You just saw that highlight. But you're absolutely right. If the coach doesn't feel like he is on the hot seat ever, not even a mild, you just hit the seat warmer, hit the 2 out of 3 on the seat warmer just so he can feel like a little bit pressure's there. Why would he change, and why would he do anything differently? Why would he deviate from what he's already done? You see offensive coordinators get fired, defensive coordinators get fired. Mike Tomlin survives it all, and this is going to happen again this year. And I think these kind of comments from James Harrison, those matter. That will matter for the locker room. That's something that he's almost saying out loud, what probably is whispered around the Pittsburgh Steelers locker room, and now it's been said out loud. And I think guys will probably talk about it, and they'll say, you know what, it is kind of a problem here that Big Ben gets different rules than the rest of us, or that Le'Veon Bell can sit out the whole year. And the Le'Veon Bell thing, going back to it real quick, the thing that shocked me with that was how many of his offensive linemen called him out too. You never see that in the NFL. The offensive linemen really rarely speak to the media, and they really don't call out guys, and it's a unit that's very cohesive. And that tells you that it's just going all different directions in Pittsburgh. There's people pointing fingers everywhere. Everyone's blaming everyone else. And it's crazy. Like I said to start the show, thank you to the Pittsburgh Steelers because you have given us enough drama to carry NFL offseason shows before the Combine and Draft.
And let me tell you, I remember thinking when the offensive linemen were calling him out that that's not something they're doing on their own. They're hearing that in the meeting room. They're hearing that from Mike Tomlin. And ultimately, it's like the Steelers had this weird disconnect where they didn't realize The reason Le'Veon Bell isn't signing a long-term contract is because the Steelers refuse to structure the contracts the way other teams do, and they don't give the guys the security right out of the gates that other teams will give a guy. And so Le'Veon Bell, to his credit, stood up and said, I'm not doing it, and I'm not taking your $14.5 million. I'm forcing my way to the market because that's the only way I'm ever going to get the kind of long-term contract I deserve, because you guys refuse to give a contract like that to anyone other than your quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger. And I guess it all comes back to the fact that they put Roethlisberger on a plane above everyone else, and it's all blown up on the Steelers. And now, the beneficiary is Antonio Brown, Big Cat, because you've got the GM of the Steelers trying to argue that, we'll find a way. We want significant compensation. We're just not going to give him away. Well, you know what? If you don't give him away, he's going to keep poking the bear. He's going to keep causing more dysfunction, and you're going to wish you had gotten rid of him. And I think at some point they will take the best offer they can get, because they just need to start peeling away some of this crap so they can focus on rebuilding this thing.
Yeah, Antonio Brown has been very effective in convincing the world that he's kind of a free agent of sorts. Like, I don't even... he's had the meetings. He's like, we've agreed that we're going to trade me. And it's so weird. It's such a bizarre situation. I've never seen a trade be talked about as much as this trade without it having actually happened. And it still can't happen for a couple of weeks. And I don't know, at what point is he really hurting the value of their trade partners? Are the Steelers going to be able to walk around the NFL and say, hey, this guy, we want a first-round pick, or whatever they may end up wanting, because everyone knows he wants out, and everyone knows that they've met, that Rooney and Antonio Brown have met, and they've decided to trade him. It feels like he's kind of undermined him. It will be interesting to see if the Steelers then go back to Antonio Brown and say, you know what, we're going to trade you to a place that you don't want to go. We're going to trade you to Buffalo. We're going to trade you somewhere. He wants to go to the 49ers. He wants to go to the Patriots. He wants to go to the Chiefs. He wants to go to all these winning teams. But what if we trade you someplace that you don't want to be, and you can go deal with it and see if you're happy there?
But who's going to trade for him if they know he doesn't want to be there? That's the thing. No
True.
one's going to want to inherit the Antonio Brown that's trying to blast his way out of Pittsburgh. And this guy's either a genius, right, and he's playing this the perfect way to get what he wants, or, I've mentioned from time to time this week, and I don't say this completely facetiously, because if the guy's got something going on, he needs to get it figured out. But at times in this offseason, he's reminded me of that weird period where Charlie Sheen was in his Tiger Blood phase, and like, something's not right here. Not quite to that extreme, but at times I just wonder, like, is he doing this deliberately, or can he just not help himself? But either way, I think it makes it harder to trade him, because you have to give the Steelers something that makes them happy. You have to make Antonio Brown happy. You're taking a lot of risk here that he can still play at a high level. And is this all going to work, and can we throw it all together in a matter of weeks? And I think it makes it harder to trade him, and it gets them to a point where maybe they just have to cut him loose at some point, or take whatever low-round draft pick they can get.
You're right. He needs one friend in his group to be like, you know what, Antonio, let's maybe go to the gym today and not tweet. Let's not do Instagram today. Let's not do, 10 questions with Antonio Brown so that it will always lead to me bashing Big Ben. Let's put down the phone. Let's go enjoy, the beach or wherever he may be living right now. I think he's out in California. Let's do that instead of tweeting all of my thoughts as soon as they pop in my head.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.